Elite musician forces a simple black woman to play the guitar, unaware she's a hidden virtuoso. The evening air buzzed with anticipation as twilight descended on Riverside Park. Every Friday, local musicians gathered at the waterfront amphitheater for open string night, where guitarists of all calibers shared their passion with an appreciative audience. Maya Johnson stood at the edge of the crowd, her worn guitar case clutched tightly in calloused hands, debating whether to sign up for a slot. At 32, Maya was a fixture in the neighborhood. The quiet woman who cleaned at the community center by day and occasionally played soulful blues on street corners during weekends. Her faded jeans and simple cotton blouse contrasted sharply with the stylish attire of most performers. The vintage Gibson guitar she carried had seen better days, its sunburst finish dulled by years of loving use, the strap frayed at the edges. "You gonna play tonight, or just stand there looking scared?" The gruff voice belonged to Old Pete, the event organizer who'd been urging Maya to perform for months. "I don't know, Pete," Maya replied, her eyes fixed on the current performer, a young college student with a gleaming acoustic guitar and impressive finger-picking technique. "The crowd seems different tonight." Different was an understatement. Usually, open string night attracted locals and amateur musicians, but tonight's audience included photographers, music bloggers and industry people. The reason sat in the front row. Xavier Winters, three-time winner of the National Guitar Virtuoso contest and newly appointed judge for the upcoming competition. Xavier commanded attention without trying. Designer clothes, perfectly styled hair, and an air of cultivated superiority. His presence at a humble community event was unusual, but rumors suggested he was scouting fresh talent for the contest while promoting his new signature guitar line. "All the more reason to play," Pete insisted. "Get your name out there." Before Maya could refuse again, Pete had scribbled her name on the list. "You're up after the next guy. No backing out now." Panic fluttered in Maya's chest as she found a quiet corner to tune her guitar. Her fingers moved automatically over the strings, muscle memory from thousands of hours of practice, guided by her late uncle's patient instruction. Uncle Calvin's words echoed in her mind, "Blues ain't about showing off, Maya girl. It's about telling the truth with 6 strings and an open heart." When her name was called, Maya walked toward the small stage with measured steps. She settled on the wooden stool, adjusted her guitar, and closed her eyes briefly. Without introduction, she began to play a slow, haunting blues progression that her uncle had taught her. One he'd learned directly from the old masters of the Mississippi Delta. Maya didn't play technically difficult pieces. Her strength lay elsewhere, in the subtle bends that made strings weep, in perfectly timed silences between notes, in the raw emotion that made simple progressions sound profound. As she played, the chattering crowd gradually quieted. Her eyes remained half-closed, lost in the music, unaware of the impact her playing was having. When she finished, the applause was warm if not thunderous. Maya quickly stood to leave the stage, uncomfortable with attention, when a voice cut through the clapping. "Interesting choice." Xavier Winters had risen from his seat. "Very rudimentary." The crowd parted as he approached the stage, his custom-made guitar slung casually across his back. "Mind if I join you for a moment?" The question wasn't really a question. Maya froze, unsure how to respond, as Xavier mounted the steps and stood beside her, towering in both physical presence and reputation. "That was a Robert Johnson progression, wasn't it?" Xavier asked, his voice carrying to the now silent audience. "Though you simplified it considerably." "My uncle taught me," Maya said quietly. "It's how he learned it." Xavier smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Let me show you how it's supposed to be played." He unslung his guitar, a gleaming instrument, with his name inlaid in mother of pearl on the fretboard, and launched into the same progression, but with elaborate embellishments, lightning-fast runs, and technical flourishes that drew gasps from the audience. "See the difference?" Xavier looked directly at Maya, his smile condescending. "Blues has evolved since the primitive recordings. It requires precision and innovation now." The audience seemed impressed, though some of the older musicians exchanged uncomfortable glances. Maya stood silently, her guitar now hanging limply at her side. She recognized Xavier's skill but sensed something crucial missing in his playing. The soul, the storytelling that her uncle had valued above all. "You play like someone who learned from books," Maya said softly, not intending to be heard. But Xavier caught it. His smile hardened. And you play like someone who never learned at all. Just endless repetition of ancient licks without understanding music theory or proper technique. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Xavier had crossed the line, but no one dared challenge him. He was Xavier Winters after all. The man who could make or break musical careers with a single word to his industry connections. Tell you what, Xavier continued, warming to his role as the center of attention. The National Guitar Virtuoso Contest is accepting final applications until midnight tonight. Since you have such confidence in your playing style, why don't you enter? He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and held it toward Maya. I've opened the application form, just put in your details. Maya stepped back. I don't compete. Of course you don't. Xavier's laugh was theatrical, designed for the audience rather than genuine amusement. Because deep down you know that authentic musicianship requires more than feeling. It requires discipline, education, and technical mastery, things that can't be learned playing on street corners. The crowd was uncomfortably silent now. Xavier pressed on, his voice taking on a mock-serious tone. But perhaps I'm being unfair. Maybe you just need the right stage to showcase your unique approach. He emphasized the word unique in a way that clearly meant inferior. The National Guitar Virtuoso Contest welcomes players of all backgrounds, Xavier continued, now addressing the crowd as much as Maya. Even those with unconventional methods. Diversity is important, isn't it? The word dripped with insincerity. Something shifted in Maya's expression, a subtle hardening around the eyes, a straightening of her spine. The guitar that had seemed heavy in her hands moments ago, now felt like an extension of herself again. Fine, she said, her voice quiet but steady. I'll enter. Xavier's eyebrows raised in genuine surprise, quickly masked by another patronizing smile. Excellent. The first round is in 3 weeks. I look forward to seeing how your authentic approach fares against formally trained musicians. He handed her his phone. As Maya filled out the application, Xavier turned to the crowd. Let this be a lesson to aspiring guitarists. Never be afraid to test yourself against the best, even if he glanced back at Maya with exaggerated encouragement, even if the odds seem insurmountable. The message was clear. Maya would fail spectacularly, and Xavier would use her as an object lesson in why his approach to music was superior. When she finished the application, Xavier took his phone back with a theatrical bow. Congratulations, you're officially a contestant in the nation's most prestigious guitar competition. He leaned closer, lowering his voice, though still loud enough for nearby audience members to hear. Just a friendly warning, the first round requires sight reading of composed pieces. Might want to brush up on your music reading skills. As Xavier returned to his seat amid scattered applause, leaving Maya alone on stage. As she descended the steps, clutching her guitar case, she felt equal parts angry and terrified. She had avoided competitions and formal performances for years, especially after what happened to her uncle. Now she had just committed to entering the most high-profile guitar contest in the country. Old Pete met her at the bottom of the steps. You okay, Maya? That guy's a real piece of work. I shouldn't have agreed, Maya whispered, the reality of what she'd done sinking in. Maybe not, Pete conceded, but I've been listening to you play for years, and that man has no idea what he just did. He squeezed her shoulder gently. He thinks he just set you up for humiliation. But I've got a feeling he just set himself up for a reckoning. Maya nodded absently, her mind already racing ahead to what she needed to do. 3 weeks to prepare for a contest that represented everything she'd avoided in music: the competition, the judgment, the reduction of art to technical scores. But underneath the anxiety, a small flame of determination was kindling. Xavier Winters had no idea who she really was or what she could do. And perhaps it was finally time to show the world what her uncle had taught her about the true soul of the guitar. The small house at the edge of town hadn't changed in 20 years. Maya's fingers trembled as she inserted the key into the lock. Since Uncle Calvin's passing 3 years ago, she rarely visited the place where she'd spent her formative years. Too many memories lived in these walls. Inside, dust motes danced in beams of afternoon sunlight. Maya moved purposefully to the back room. Uncle Calvin's sanctuary. The space remained untouched. Shelves of vinyl records, walls covered with yellowing concert posters, and in the corner, a glass case containing 3 vintage guitars that Maya hadn't touched since the funeral. "I need your help again," she whispered to the empty room. Maya sank into the worn leather armchair and closed her eyes, letting memories wash over her. She'd been 12 when she came to live with Uncle Calvin after her parents' accident, a sullen, grief-stricken child who found solace only in the strange, beautiful sounds that emerged from her uncle's guitar. Uncle Calvin Jackson hadn't always been a recluse living on the outskirts of town. In the 1970s, he'd been proclaimed the next great blues innovator after a legendary performance at the Chicago Blues Festival. Record executives had swarmed him with contracts and promises of fame. Calvin had refused them all, disappearing from the music scene at the height of his recognition. "Why did you walk away?" Maya had asked him once when she was 16. Calvin's eyes had grown distant. "Because they wanted to own my music. Not just distribute it. They wanted to change it, package it, make it something it wasn't." He'd strummed a few haunting chords. "Some music isn't meant for selling, it's meant for healing." For 10 years, Calvin had taught Maya everything he knew. Techniques passed down directly from blues legends most people only knew from scratchy recordings. Her education happened in this very room, night after night, her fingers bleeding until calluses formed. "Music isn't in the fingers, Maya girl," Calvin would say. "It's in the spaces between heartbeats. Anyone can learn scales. Few learn to speak through them." Maya stood and carefully opened the glass case, removing the oldest guitar, a 1932 Gibson L00, with a sound that could make grown men weep. This had been Calvin's favorite, the one he refused to play in public after his retreat from the industry. As she cradled it, a folded paper fell from inside the case. Maya recognized her uncle's handwriting immediately. "For when you're ready to be heard." Her eyes welled with tears. Somehow he'd known this day would come. Maya began to play, rusty at first, then with growing confidence. She didn't practice the kind of pieces likely to appear in the competition. Instead, she played her uncle's compositions, complex, emotional pieces, that required not just technical skill but a spiritual connection to the instrument. Hours passed. When darkness fell, Maya reluctantly set the guitar aside, and moved to Calvin's old desk. From the bottom drawer she extracted a leather-bound journal filled with handwritten music, some original compositions, others uniquely transcribed versions of blues standards. But what she needed most was tucked between the pages, a letter from Martin Hammond, Calvin's former manager. The yellowed paper contained an apology, written 10 years after Calvin's disappearance from the music world. In it, Hammond confessed to manipulating contest results, sabotaging Calvin's rivals, and other unethical actions, all without Calvin's knowledge, to advance Calvin's career. The revelation had devastated her uncle, confirming his worst suspicions about the industry he'd fled. Maya studied the letter carefully. The National Guitar Virtuoso contest had existed even then, though under a different name. Hammond mentioned specific methods of manipulation, influence over certain judges, technical irregularities in scoring systems. She wondered how much had changed in the decades since. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Brave move tonight. Don't embarrass yourself by actually showing up, X." Maya's jaw tightened. Xavier's mockery had awakened something she'd suppressed for years, not just her musical ability but her fighting spirit. She returned to the guitar, playing with renewed purpose. Uncle Calvin had taught her to master every style, the mathematical precision of classical, the improvisational freedom of jazz, the raw emotion of blues, the technical fireworks of flamenco. While she performed simply on street corners, she practiced complexity in private, honoring the comprehensive education her uncle had provided. "You never know when you'll need all the tools," he told her. "Music is a language with many dialects. Learn them all, then choose which to speak." Maya played deep into the night, her fingers remembering patterns they hadn't traced in years. The competition would test her in ways street performance never had, but she possessed skills few would expect. Calvin had insisted she learn to sight read, to compose, to improvise over any progression. When dawn broke, Maya carefully returned the guitar to its case. On the table beside it she placed a small blues harp, her uncle's harmonica. "I'll make it right," she promised the silent instrument. "Not for revenge, for you." She left the house with Calvin's journal and a renewed conviction. The contest would be her first public performance in a formal setting since the traumatic experience that had driven her to street corners and anonymity. The memories still stung. 10 years ago she'd entered a local competition only to discover afterward that her advancement had been arranged by a well-meaning but misguided Uncle Calvin, who'd called in favors to help her career. The humiliation had been complete. She'd vowed never to compete again, choosing instead to play music only for its own sake. Now, circumstances demanded she break that vow. As Maya walked home through the awakening city, she felt a strange sense of calm. Xavier had intended to shame her, but he'd inadvertently set her on a path she'd been avoiding too long. Perhaps it was finally time for Calvin Jackson's legacy to emerge from the shadows. Not through his own playing, but through the niece who carried his teachings in her hands and heart. The preliminary rounds of the National Guitar Virtuoso contest were held in the Grand Symphony Hall, a venue normally reserved for world-class orchestras. Maya stood backstage, clutching her guitar case, watching competitors warm up with dizzying arpeggios and complex classical etudes. Most carried multiple high-end instruments, had support teams adjusting their equipment, and exuded the confidence of seasoned performers. First time? A young man with bright green hair nodded toward Maya's solitary setup, her uncle's Gibson and nothing else. Is it that obvious? Maya smiled nervously. You're not wearing $300 shoes or warming up with Paganini caprices, so yeah. He extended his hand. I'm Eli, third time competing, never made it past the second round. Maya? Definitely first time. Eli lowered his voice. Word of advice? The first round is technically blind auditions, but it's an open secret that certain players get preferential treatment. What do you mean? Just watch who advances. You'll see the pattern. Before Maya could probe further, a stage manager appeared. 5-minute call for preliminary group 6. Report to the holding area. The first round was relatively straightforward. Each guitarist performed a required piece and a selection of their choice behind a screen meant to eliminate bias. Maya played solidly, though not spectacularly, deliberately holding back her full abilities. She didn't want Xavier's attention yet. To her surprise, she advanced, though she noticed several brilliant performers were eliminated despite flawless performances. LA hadn't made it either. Congratulations, he said, packing up his guitar. You must have friends in high places. I don't, Maya insisted. LA shrugged. Then you're exceptionally good or exceptionally lucky. Either way, watch your back in the quarters. That's where things get weird. The quarterfinals abandoned the pretense of blind auditions. Contestants performed on stage before the judges, who included Xavier and 4 other industry figures. The required piece was technically challenging, a modern composition with unusual time signatures and lightning-fast passages. Maya performed competently, but noticed something odd. Whenever certain contestants played, 3 of the 5 judges would lean together, whispering and nodding, regardless of the quality of the performance. These same contestants received unusually high scores, advancing despite visible mistakes. After her performance, Maya lingered in the hallway near the judges' room pretending to adjust her guitar case. Winter's picks are all advancing as planned, she overheard a female voice say, but keep the scoring reasonable. We had too many complaints last year. What about that street player he added last minute? Johnson? A male voice asked. Xavier says, let her through one more round. He wants to make an example of her in the semi-finals when the complexity level jumps. Maya slipped away before they emerged, her heart pounding. Her suspicions were confirmed. The contest was manipulated, just as it had been in her uncle's day. That evening in her hotel room, Maya called Pete. I need information on the judges, she explained. Pete was silent for a moment. You found something. It's rigged, Pete. Not completely, there's enough legitimacy to maintain appearances, but Xavier's controlling who advances. I've heard rumors for years, Pete admitted. But proving it? I'm not here to prove anything, Maya said, then hesitated. At least, that wasn't my original plan. The semifinals featured remaining contestants performing with a small backing orchestra. Maya noticed more irregularities. Certain performers received extra rehearsal time, while others dealt with mysterious technical difficulties. One promising guitarist found his instrument mysteriously detuned just before going on stage. During her performance, Maya finally revealed a hint of her true abilities. weaving subtle improvisations through the rigid classical piece that drew appreciative murmurs from the audience. When she finished, she caught Xavier's expression, a mixture of surprise and irritation quickly masked by his professional smile. Backstage afterward, a tall woman in an expensive suit approached. "Impressive adaptation of Rodrigo," she said. "I'm Vanessa Reed, one of the associate producers." "Thank you," Maya replied, cautiously. "You should be proud to have come this far," Vanessa continued, her tone sympathetic. "The finals are highly competitive." The implication was clear. This is as far as you'll go. Later that night, Maya accessed the contest's online portal to check semi-final scores. A technical glitch momentarily displayed raw scoring data before reverting to official totals. The brief glimpse revealed significant adjustments to multiple contestants' scores, including her own. Downward. Despite the manipulation, Maya advanced to the finals. Likely because Xavier wanted his object lesson to be public and decisive. The finalists were announced at a press reception, where Xavier held court among industry executives. "Our most diverse group of finalists ever," Xavier proclaimed to reporters. From classically trained prodigies to, his gaze found Maya across the room, undiscovered street performers. The guitar speaks in many voices. After the reception, Maya overheard Xavier in heated conversation with one of the judges. "She wasn't supposed to be this good," the judge hissed. "If she keeps improving, she won't win." Xavier cut in. "I've arranged something special for the finals. Trust me." Maya slipped away, pulling out her phone to record a voice memo, documenting what she'd heard. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was a start. She'd been collecting evidence, screenshots of the scoring discrepancies, recordings of suspicious conversations, testimony from eliminated contestants who'd experienced strange technical issues. "The finals are tomorrow," she whispered to herself. "Time to decide what this is really about." That night, Maya returned to her hotel room to find an envelope under her door. Inside was a handwritten note. "Some contests aren't about music. Be careful." Below was a USB drive labeled NGVC Financial Records. Maya plugged it into her laptop. The files showed payments from Xavier's production company to two of the judges, disguised as consulting fees. Most damning was an email chain discussing how to manage outcomes while maintaining plausible competition integrity. She sat back, understanding the full scope of what she'd stumbled into. This wasn't just about one rigged contest. It was about years of manipulation that had shaped careers, record deals, and the very sound of contemporary guitar music. Xavier's influence had determined who succeeded and who disappeared, all while presenting himself as the objective standard of excellence. Maya copied the files, then hid the drive in her guitar case. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation, and she needed to decide, was this about winning a corrupt contest, or exposing the corruption itself? The morning of the finals dawned crisp and clear. Maya woke early, fingers moving automatically through practice patterns as she sat on the edge of her hotel bed. Today would determine not just the winner of the National Guitar Virtuoso contest, but perhaps the future of the competition itself. News vans lined the entrance to Symphony Hall. The finals had become a major cultural event, broadcast live and drawing celebrities, industry executives, and music aficionados from across the country. Maya slipped in through a side entrance, avoiding the red carpet where Xavier was already holding court. "The favorite returns to defend his kingdom," a voice remarked beside her. It was Eli, the green-haired guitarist from the preliminaries. "What are you doing here?" Maya asks, surprised. "Couldn't miss the finale," he nodded toward her guitar case. "Ready to shake things up?" "More than you know," Maya replied. Backstage was controlled chaos. The finalists, Maya and three others, were prepped by makeup artists and sound engineers. Xavier appeared, immaculate in a designer suit, moving through the space like he owned it. "Finalists," he announced. "A reminder of today's format. Each of you will perform the required piece with full orchestral backing, followed by your personal selection. I'll close the show with a special performance before the winner announcement." His gaze lingered on Maya. "Good luck to all, may the most deserving artist win." The irony wasn't lost on her. The first two finalists performed admirably, a classically trained woman from Juilliard and a young prodigy from Seoul. Both received enthusiastic applause and solid scores from the judges. The third finalist, a man Maya recognized as one of Xavier's protégés, played flawlessly, but with a mechanical precision that left the audience respectful rather than moved. Then it was Maya's turn. As she walked onto the stage, she spotted familiar faces in the audience. Pete, some regulars from her street performances, and surprisingly Martin Hammond, her uncle's former manager, now elderly but alert. Their presence steadied her nerves. The required piece was Rodrigo's Concerto de Aranja, a masterwork of classical guitar. Maya had practiced it religiously, but as she settled into position, she noticed something off about her guitar. The action felt different, slightly higher, making fast passages more difficult. The strings were new but not her preferred gauge. Someone had tampered with her instrument. A lesser player might have panicked, but Maya had played on poorly maintained guitars on street corners for years. She made a split-second decision to adapt rather than protest, adjusting her technique to compensate for the altered instrument. As the orchestra began the iconic opening, Maya closed her eyes briefly, channeling her uncle's teaching. When obstacles appear, incorporate them into your story. She began to play, her fingers finding their way across the unfamiliar tension of the strings. Instead of fighting the higher action, she used it to create more pronounced dynamics, turning technical disadvantage into expressive advantage. Halfway through the piece, Maya noticed Xavier watching from the wings, his expression darkening as he realized his sabotage had failed. She met his gaze without faltering, fingers flying through a particularly complex passage, with a freedom that contradicted the technical constraints she was working against. The audience sensed something extraordinary was happening. The piece grew beyond its classical boundaries, Maya's interpretation bringing out emotional textures rarely explored in traditional performances. When she finished, the hall erupted in applause. Even the orchestra members were tapping their bows appreciatively. For her personal selection, Maya unpacked her second guitar, her uncle's treasured vintage Gibson that she'd kept securely with her since arriving. No one had had an opportunity to tamper with this instrument. For my final piece, Maya addressed the audience directly, breaking convention. I'd like to play an original composition called Calvin's Truth. It's dedicated to my uncle, who taught me that music isn't a competition, it's a conversation. Xavier shifted uncomfortably in his judge's chair. Maya began simply, with a blues progression that gradually evolved into something more complex. A piece that seamlessly blended classical structure with blues, soul, jazz improvisation with rock energy. It was technically brilliant but emotionally transcendent, the culmination of everything her uncle had taught her and everything she discovered on her own journey. Midway through, she incorporated a subtle quotation from one of Calvin Jackson's rare recordings. A musical signature that Hammond and other old-timers would recognize immediately. The elderly manager's eyes widened in recognition. By the final measures, the audience was completely silent, the kind of silence that comes not from disinterest but from collective breath-holding. When Maya struck the final chord, allowing it to resonate through the hall, there was a moment of stunned silence before the audience erupted. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. Audience members were filming with their phones, social media already buzzing with clips of her performance. Even 2 of the judges stood, though Xavier remained seated, his face a mask of barely controlled anger. When the applause finally subsided, Xavier took the stage for his exhibition performance, a technical showcase on his signature model guitar. His playing was flawless as always, but after Maya's performance, the emotional emptiness at its core was glaringly apparent. The audience responded politely, but the energy had shifted irrevocably. During the deliberation break, Maya was approached by Hammond. "You play just like him," the old manager said, his voice thick with emotion. "Calvin would be proud." "Thank you for coming," Maya replied, noticing his frailty. "I had to see it." "When I heard your name," Hammond glanced around and lowered his voice. "Be careful. Xavier's cut from the same cloth as the men who drove your uncle away." "I know," Maya said quietly. "I found your letter." Hammond's eyes widened. "Then you understand what's at stake." Before he could say more, they were interrupted by the announcement that the judges had reached their decision. The finalists were called back to the stage. Xavier took the microphone, his camera-ready smile firmly in place. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've witnessed extraordinary talent today. Before announcing our winner, I'd like to acknowledge our diverse finalists." Diverse? The word escaped Maya's lips before she could stop herself, her microphone still live. Xavier turned, one eyebrow raised. Excuse me? Something snapped inside Maya. All the manipulation, the tampering with her guitar, the years of seeing talented musicians discarded by a rigged system, it crystallized into a moment of clarity. This contest isn't diverse, she continued, her voice steady. It's carefully curated to give the appearance of fairness while maintaining the status quo. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Xavier's smile became strained. Ms. Johnson, this isn't the appropriate time for... When is the appropriate time to discuss how my guitar was tampered with backstage? Or how contestants' scores are adjusted after performances? Or how you've been paying two of the judges through your production company? Xavier's face drained of color. The other finalists exchanged glances, while the judges sat in stunned silence. These are serious and unfounded accusations, Xavier managed. Not unfounded, Maya replied, pulling out her phone. I have documentation, recordings of backstage conversations about managing outcomes. Financial records showing payments to judges disguised as consulting fees. Screenshots of score manipulations. The hall had gone completely silent. In the third row, Maya spotted a woman with a press badge leaning forward intently. You've been constructing your legacy on a foundation of deception, Maya continued. Manipulating who succeeds, who gets recording contracts, who disappears. Just like they did to my uncle, Calvin Jackson, 20 years ago. At the mention of Calvin's name, recognition dawned on several older audience members. Hammond nodded encouragingly from his seat. Xavier stepped closer, his microphone momentarily lowered. You have no idea what you're doing, he hissed. I can destroy your career before it even begins. Maya smiled sadly. I don't have a career to destroy. I play music because I love it, not because I need your approval or your rigged accolades. She turned to address the stunned audience. I didn't enter this competition to win. I entered because a man who's built his success on manipulating others thought he could humiliate a street musician who didn't play by his rules. I entered to honor my uncle's legacy, and now I'm withdrawing from consideration. Maya unplugged her guitar, turned her back on Xavier, and walked off the stage to stunned silence, followed by a growing wave of applause that built into another standing ovation. As she reached the wings, she heard Xavier attempting to regain control, his voice strained as he called for the audience to settle down. But the damage was done. Reporters were already rushing for the exits, phones to their ears. The truth, like a perfect note, had been struck, and it would resonate long after today's performance ended. The morning after Maya's dramatic exit from the National Guitar Virtuoso contest, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Overnight, clips of her confrontation with Xavier had gone viral. Guitargate trending across social media platforms. Music blogs, news outlets, and industry publications were all demanding interviews. Maya sat on her small apartment's fire escape, watching the sunrise and ignoring the notifications. She wasn't interested in fame, that had never been her goal. But the evidence she'd gathered needed to reach the right people. She scrolled through her contacts and called Vanessa Reed, the associate producer she'd met backstage. I've been expecting your call, Vanessa answered, immediately. The board of directors is in emergency session. Xavier's lawyers are already issuing denials. I have everything documented, Maya said quietly. Financial records, recordings, screenshots. Enough to prove systematic manipulation going back years. Silence stretched across the line. Meet me at Riverside Cafe in an hour. Vanessa finally replied. Bring everything. When Maya arrived, she found not just Vanessa but 3 other people, an entertainment lawyer, a representative from the contest's main sponsor, and a music journalist from the industry's most respected publication. Before we start, Vanessa said, you should know that I've been building a case against Xavier for 2 years. Your evidence might be the tipping point we needed. For the next hour, Maya shared everything she had collected. The journalist took careful notes while the lawyer examined the financial documents. This explains a lot, the sponsor representative said grimly. We've noticed certain patterns in winners and endorsement deals, but could never prove anything concrete. By noon, the story had broken across major outlets. By evening, it was the lead on entertainment news. Xavier Winters, the guitar world's golden boy, stood accused of orchestrating a years-long scheme to manipulate contest results, blackball rivals, and create an artificial dynasty that benefited himself and his allies. The carefully cultivated image of meritocracy around the competition crumbled under scrutiny. From his penthouse apartment, Xavier launched a desperate counteroffensive. He appeared on a sympathetic podcast, dismissing Maya as a failed musician with a grudge, and the evidence as doctored by competitors. This woman couldn't make it in the industry legitimately. Xavier insisted, leaning forward intensely. So she's attempting to tear down institutions she couldn't succeed within. Ask yourselves, who is Maya Johnson? Nobody. A street performer who's never released an album, never toured, never earned a single industry accolade. But his dismissals only fueled public interest in Maya's story. Journalists began digging into her background, discovering Calvin Jackson's legacy and the parallels between what happened to him and the current situation. 3 days after the finals, a former contest judge came forward with his own testimonial about Xavier's influence peddling. Then another. By week's end, 5 past contestants had spoken out about mysterious technical problems, score adjustments, and back-channel threats that had defined their contest experiences. Most damning was Martin Hammond's public statement detailing how the corruption that had driven Calvin Jackson from the industry decades ago had continued unabated under Xavier's influence. History repeats itself, the elderly manager told reporters. Calvin walked away rather than participate in a corrupt system. His niece chose to expose it instead. The contest's governing board announced a formal investigation and suspended Xavier from his judging position. Major sponsors began distancing themselves. His signature guitar line was pulled from promotional materials. Maya avoided the spotlight, declining interview requests and returning to her normal routine, cleaning at the community center, playing casual gigs at local venues, but the music world wouldn't let her fade into obscurity. 1 week after the contest, Xavier's desperate attempts to salvage his reputation culminated in a press conference at his record label's headquarters. These accusations have been blown out of proportion. He began, his usual confidence noticeably diminished. Yes, I've advocated for certain artists I believed in. Yes, I've provided mentorship that may have given some contestants advantages. But that's not corruption, it's cultivation of talent. Halfway through his remarks, the event was disrupted when several employees of his record label walked out in protest. The next day, the label announced they were reviewing their relationship with Mr. Winters in light of recent allegations. Maya watched the unraveling from a distance, taking no pleasure in Xavier's downfall but recognizing its necessity. The system needed cleansing, not just for her uncle's memory, but for every talented musician who'd been sidelined because they didn't fit Xavier's narrow definition of excellence. 10 days after the contest, Maya received an unexpected visitor at her apartment. Eli, the green-haired guitarist from the preliminaries. "You've started a revolution," he said, settling onto her worn couch. "Musicians are speaking up everywhere, not just about this contest, but about gatekeeping throughout the industry." "That wasn't my intention," Maya replied, making tea in her tiny kitchen. "Revolutions rarely start intentionally," Eli grinned. "But now that it's happening, we need your voice. There's a rally tomorrow at Symphony Hall. Musicians demanding transparency in competitions, diversity in judging panels, blind auditions all the way through finals." Maya hesitated. "I'm not a spokesperson, I just want to honor your uncle." "I know, but you've become something more now, a symbol." Before Maya could respond, her phone lit up with breaking news. Xavier Winters was stepping down from his positions at the contest, his record label, and the conservatory where he taught. His statement cited personal reasons and a desire to refocus on music rather than administration. The carefully worded resignation made no admission of wrongdoing, but industry insiders recognized it for what it was. Surrender. That evening, Maya visited her uncle's house again, sitting in the familiar armchair surrounded by his collection of instruments and records. She placed the vintage Gibson carefully on its stand. "It's done," she told the empty room. "Not how I expected, but done." Her phone buzzed with a text from Pete. "Turn on channel 4 now." Maya flipped on the small television in the corner. Xavier Winters was giving what appeared to be an impromptu statement outside his apartment building, surrounded by reporters. "Recent events have forced me to reflect on my role in this industry," he said, his voice lacking its usual polish. "While I maintain that many allegations are exaggerated, I acknowledge that my influence may have distorted the landscape in ways I didn't fully appreciate." It wasn't a full confession, but it was the beginning of accountability. The camera caught the moment a moving truck arrived behind him. As Xavier was leaving his penthouse, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Maya turned off the TV, feeling not triumph but a complicated mixture of vindication and melancholy. The system that had crushed her uncle's spirit and manipulated countless careers was facing a reckoning, but the cost had been high for everyone involved. As she locked up Calvin's house, her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. Maya Johnson? This is Catherine Reeves from Blue Note Records. We've been following recent events with great interest. Your performance of Calvin's Truth was extraordinary. Would you consider coming in to discuss your musical future? Maya paused on the porch, looking up at the stars. I'll think about it, she said finally. But I have some conditions about artistic control. The revolution was just beginning, and this time Maya would help write the rules. 6 months after the National Guitar Virtuoso contest scandal broke, Maya stood backstage at the Blue Note Jazz Club in New York City. Tonight would be the final performance of her 10-city tour, a tour that had sold out within hours of being announced. 5 minutes, Miss Johnson, the stage manager said with a respectful nod. Maya's life had transformed in ways she never anticipated. The viral moment of her confrontation with Xavier had catapulted her into reluctant fame, but it was her musicianship that sustained public interest. When Blue Note Records released a live recording of Calvin's Truth as a digital single, it topped the jazz and blues charts for weeks. Her debut album, simply titled Uncle's Lessons, had earned critical acclaim for its innovative fusion of blues traditions with contemporary techniques. Music critics praised her ability to honor roots while pushing boundaries, the very quality Xavier had once mocked. But success hadn't changed Maya's essential approach to music. She insisted on keeping her performances intimate, refusing stadium venues in favor of smaller clubs where the audience could feel the music's pulse. She maintained creative control over her recordings, working with producers who respected her vision rather than trying to reshape it. Ready? Pete appeared at her side, now serving as her tour manager, the only person she'd trusted to help navigate her new reality. As I'll ever be, Maya replied, taking a deep breath. The club was packed with an eclectic crowd, industry veterans, young musicians, blues aficionados, and casual fans drawn by the growing legend of the woman who'd exposed the industry's dark underbelly, while creating something beautiful in the process. In the front row sat Martin Hammond, frailer than before, but beaming with pride, alongside several elderly blues musicians who'd been Calvin's contemporaries. They'd become Maya's informal council of elders, sharing stories and jam sessions that connected her even more deeply to the musical tradition she embodied. As Maya walked on stage, the vintage Gibson gleaming under the spotlight, the audience erupted. She settled onto her stool, adjusted her microphone, and smiled. "Thank you all for coming," she said simply. "Tonight's about honoring traditions while creating new ones. Let's make some honest music together." She began with a tribute to her uncle, a medley of his compositions interwoven with blues standards. Her playing had evolved even further in recent months, but the soul of it remained unchanged, that elusive quality that could make a simple progression sound profound and a complex one accessible. Between songs, Maya shared stories about Calvin, about learning guitar on street corners, about finding truth through music. The audience hung on every word, sensing they were witnessing something authentic in an industry often defined by artifice. Midway through her set, Maya invited a special guest on stage. L.A., whose green hair was now blue, and who had become an advocate for industry reform while developing his own career. "This next piece is called Reconstruction," Maya announced as they settled into position for a duet. "Because sometimes you have to tear down before you can build up." The song they performed, a complex conversational piece with Maya and Eli trading intricate phrases, symbolized the changes sweeping through the industry. Following the Xavier scandal, the National Guitar Virtuoso contest had been suspended, then completely restructured with transparent judging protocols, diverse panels, and safeguards against manipulation. Similar reforms were spreading through other competitions and institutions. A coalition of musicians, led in part by contestants who'd been victims of Xavier's system, had formed an advocacy group pushing for industry-wide changes. Maya supported their work financially, but stayed largely behind the scenes, preferring to let her music speak for itself. As for Xavier Winters, his fall had been swift but not complete. After a period of silence, He'd re-emerged with a YouTube channel featuring stripped-down performances and tutorials. Gone were the designer clothes and promotional deals. His playing had changed too. Less focused on technical perfection, more on emotional connection. Whether this represented genuine growth or calculated rebranding remained debated among music critics. Maya harbored no ill will toward him. In a rare interview with a music magazine, she'd said simply, "Everyone deserves the chance to find their authentic voice. Sometimes that happens through success, sometimes through failure." After her final encore, Maya returned to her dressing room to find a small package waiting. Inside was a handwritten note from Hammond, and a vintage blues record, one of Calvin's rare studio sessions that had never been released commercially. "He would have wanted you to have the master tapes," Hammond's note read. "Your tour ends tonight. His legacy continues through you." Tears pricked Maya's eyes as she carefully handled the precious vinyl. This was what it had all been about, not vengeance or fame, but preservation of something pure in a world that often valued flash over substance. A knock at the door preceded Pete's entrance. "Full house waiting for you at the after party," he said. "Including 3 record executives who want to talk about your next album, and that film director who's interested in Calvin's story." Maya carefully placed the record in its protective sleeve. "Tell them I'll be there soon." After Pete left, Maya took a moment to call her old community center. Though she could have afforded not to work there anymore, she still volunteered weekly when not touring, teaching free guitar lessons to neighborhood kids. For Maya, success meant creating access, not establishing distance. "How'd it go, Miss Maya?" asked Darius, a 13-year-old prodigy who reminded her of herself at that age. "It went well," she said, smiling. "But I'm looking forward to our lesson on Tuesday. You ready to learn that progression we talked about?" "Been practicing every day," he assured her. "That's what matters," Maya replied. "Consistency and heart. Everything else follows." As she ended the call and prepared to join the celebration, Maya reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. What had begun as Xavier's attempt to humiliate her had instead catalyzed not just her own career but a movement toward greater authenticity in the industry. Uncle Calvin's teachings had proven more powerful than even he might have imagined. Not just the guitar techniques he'd passed down, but his philosophy about music as truth-telling, as healing, as connection. Maya picked up her guitar one last time before heading to the party. She played a simple blues progression, the first one Calvin had taught her as a grief-stricken 12-year-old. The notes rang true and clear, a reminder that beneath all the complexity, all the technique, all the industry machinery, music at its core was about one human spirit speaking to another. That was the victory that mattered most, not the sold-out venues or critical acclaim, but the preservation of that essential truth. As Maya closed her guitar case, she whispered a phrase her uncle had often repeated: "Play from the heart, and you'll never hit a wrong note." Then she stepped out into a future she had helped reshape, carrying the past with honor, but not bound by it, ready to write the next verse of her own remarkable story.